The great circular chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with panic. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating pods, their voices rising in a chorus of fear. The massive holographic display in the center of the room showed a pulsing red core that grew more unstable by the minute. "The quantum reactor's containment field is failing," announced first speaker Ben, his blue crystalline form glowing dimly with worry. "Our best engineers have tried everything in the standard protocols. Nothing is working." The space station they were on, Heaven's Gate, was the pride of the Galactic Council. It served as the central hub for all faster-than-light travel in the galaxy. If something went wrong here, the entire galactic civilization would feel its effects. "The temporal readings are getting worse," said Technical Director Max, his tentacles waving frantically over his control panel. "The reactor isn't just failing. It's creating a time distortion. If we don't fix this in the next 12 hours, the anomaly will become permanent. This entire sector of space could be lost in a time loop forever." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their pods. They had already tried the most advanced solutions available. AI systems had run billions of simulations. Quantum computers had analyzed every possibility. Nothing had worked. In the back of the chamber, third speaker Ray cleared his throat. As one of the few council members who regularly dealt with primitive worlds, he had an unusual suggestion. "There might be one option we haven't considered." The chamber fell silent. Any new idea, no matter how strange, was worth hearing. "We could call a human." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Several council members activated their personal shield generators in reflex. "A Deathworlder." First speaker Ben's crystal structure flickered in shock. "In Heaven's Gate, near our most advanced technology." "Exactly," Ray said, standing firmer. "Think about it. Humans don't just survive on a planet with high gravity, extreme temperature variations, and constant natural disasters. They thrive there. They still use mechanical tools. They understand how things work at the most basic level." "But they're primitive," protested Max, his tentacles curling in disgust. "They still use combustion engines." "Maybe that's exactly what we need," Ray argued. "All our advanced solutions have failed. Perhaps we need someone who thinks differently." The debate raged for another precious hour before desperation won out. With time running short, they sent the call to Earth. Tom Reed was having a perfectly normal day in his repair shop in Montana when the message arrived. He was elbow-deep in his old truck's engine, cursing at a stubborn bolt, when a beam of light appeared in his workshop. "Thomas Reed of Earth," a formal voice announced from the light. "The Galactic Council requires your expertise in an urgent matter." Tom slowly put down his wrench and wiped his hands on his already dirty jeans. At 45 years old, he had seen plenty of strange things in his career as a mechanic, but this was a first. "Don't suppose this could wait until I finish fixing my truck?" he asked, more curious than surprised. "The fate of an entire sector of space hangs in the balance. Time is of the essence." Tom sighed and reached for his toolbox, the old, heavy one made of steel that had belonged to his father. "All right, but I'm bringing my tools. Never trust a job where they say they have everything you need." The beam of light brightened. "Your primitive implements will not be necessary. We have the most advanced technology in the galaxy." Tom just smiled and gripped his toolbox tighter. "Trust me, sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Now, what exactly is broken?" As the beam prepared to transport him, Tom grabbed one last thing, his grandfather's old analog watch. He had learned long ago that when things got weird, it was best to have something reliable to count on. The light enveloped him, and his workshop disappeared. The last thing that could be heard was his quiet mutter, "Well, this should be interesting." The bright light faded, and Tom found himself standing in what looked like a massive glass bubble in space. Stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and below his feet, he could see the curved surface of Heaven's Gate Station spinning slowly against the darkness. His arrival caused immediate chaos. "It's not wearing a protection suit," screamed one alien, their feathers puffing up in alarm. "The gravity controls aren't set for Deathworld levels," shouted another. Tom just stood there, heavy toolbox in hand, watching with amusement as the aliens panicked. They looked like characters from a science fiction movie. Some had tentacles, others were made of crystal, and a few seemed to float in protective bubbles. First Speaker Ben floated forward in his crystal form. "Mr. Reed, we apologize for the confused welcome. We rarely have humans aboard Heaven's Gate." "No problem," Tom said, taking a few experimental steps. "Gravity feels fine to me. Bit light, actually. Like being in Denver." He looked around the massive chamber. "Now, where's this broken reactor of yours?" The station's AI materialized as a glowing blue sphere. "Warning. The humans' thought patterns are too chaotic for me to predict. I cannot guarantee station safety with this entity aboard." "Well," Tom chuckled, "that's the nicest way I've ever been called unpredictable." He pulled out his old analog watch and checked the time. "You said we have 12 hours, right? Better get moving." Technical Director Max floated closer, his tentacles twitching nervously. "We must first go through the safety protocols. The quantum reactor is extremely delicate. One wrong move cooled." Tom cut him off by opening his toolbox. The sound of metal tools clicking together made several aliens jump back. "Those are physical implements?" Max asked, horror in his voice. "Made of processed earth metals." "Yep. Got my wrench, hammer, screwdrivers, pliers. Everything a good mechanic needs." Tom held up a wrench, causing nearby aliens to activate their personal shields. Sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution. First Speaker Ben's crystal form flickered with concern. "We have molecular reconstructors and quantum manipulation fields. Surely you don't intend to use those primitive tools on our advanced technology." Tom walked over to a nearby wall display, studying the reactor schematics. "You folks overthink things, you know that. Sometimes a machine just needs someone who can feel what's wrong with it." He tapped the display. "See this part here? Your coolant system's completely overcomplicated. No wonder it's failing." The aliens watched in fascination as Tom pulled out a small notepad, made of actual paper, and started taking notes with a pencil. "Is that processed tree pulp?" one alien whispered to another. "And carbon graphite marking tools." "Fascinating primitive behavior," the other whispered back. "Should we stop him?" The station's AI sphere pulsed with confusion. "Human, I must inform you that I have run 47 million simulations on the reactor problem. The chances of a solution involving physical tools is 0.0000001%. Tom looked up from his notes and smiled. "Good thing I don't believe in those kinds of odds." He closed his notepad and put it in his pocket. "Right, I need to see the reactor control room. And fair warning, you folks might want to turn off some of your safety protocols. What we're about to do probably isn't in any of your manuals." First Speaker Ben's crystal form dimmed in worry. "Is this normal human repair procedure?" "Normal." Tom laughed, shouldering his toolbox. "Nothing about this is normal. But that's exactly why you call the human, isn't it?" He checked his watch again. 11 hours and 15 minutes left. Time to get to work. As they led him toward the reactor section, Tom could hear the aliens muttering behind him about primitive methods and unpredictable Deathworlders. He just smiled and patted his toolbox. Sometimes being underestimated was the best advantage a person could have. The station's AI made one final announcement. "Warning. Human unpredictability levels exceeding safe parameters. Recommend immediate containment." "Too late for that," Tom muttered. "Let's go save your station." The reactor control room looked like something out of a dream. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing numbers and diagrams that changed faster than the eye could follow. In the center, behind a glowing force field, sat the quantum reactor's main control unit, a gleaming silver cube that hummed with energy. Tom walked straight to the main console, ignoring the warning holograms that popped up around him. "Please step back," the station's AI announced. "You are approaching sensitive equipment." "That's the idea," Tom said, putting down his toolbox with a solid clank that made everyone jump. He studied the reactor readings, then pulled out his wrench. "First thing we need to do is check the physical connections." Technical Director Max's tentacles curled in horror. Physical connections. Everything is managed by quantum fields and... A loud banging sound cut him off. Tom had opened a panel and was tapping different pipes with his wrench, listening carefully to each sound. "What are you doing?" First Speaker Ben asked, his crystal form flickering rapidly. "Percussion maintenance," Tom replied, still tapping. "Sometimes you've got to listen to the machine." "Aha." He stopped at one particular pipe. "Hear that hollow sound? Your coolant isn't flowing right here." The aliens crowded closer, fascinated despite themselves. "The quantum diagnostics show nothing wrong with that section," Max protested. "That's because you're only looking at the fancy stuff." Tom reached deep into the panel, his arm disappearing up to the shoulder. "Basic physics still applies, even with quantum technology. If fluid doesn't flow right, it doesn't matter how many quantum fields you have." Suddenly, a sharp hiss filled the room. Several aliens fled to the far corners, but Tom just grinned. "Found it. You've got a vacuum pocket in your coolant system. All those quantum fields were trying to force the coolant through, but you can't compress a vacuum with fancy technology. You need to." He gave something a hard whack with his wrench. The hissing stopped. The reactor's pitch changed, dropping to a lower, healthier hum. Reactor efficiency improved by 15%. The AI announced, sounding confused. "But the method used does not compute with any known repair protocols." Tom wiped his hands on his jeans. "That's because sometimes you need to stop thinking like a computer and start thinking like a plumber." He checked his watch. 10 hours left. And that was just the easy part. He pulled out a flashlight, a simple LED one, and shined it into the panel. The aliens watched in amazement as he ignored all their advanced scanning equipment in favor of just looking with his own eyes. "Your next problem is right there," he pointed. "Your power conduits are getting microfractures from thermal stress. Your sensors don't see them because they're too busy looking for quantum problems." First Speaker Ben floated closer. "Can you fix it?" "Sure, but you're not going to like how." Tom reached into his toolbox and pulled out what looked like a roll of thick, silvery tape. "What primitive material is that?" Max asked, his tentacles twitching nervously. This is duct tape. Humans have been using it to fix things for over 100 years." Tom started tearing off strips. "It's not pretty, but it'll hold those conduits together until you can replace them properly." The AI's voice took on a tone of what almost sounded like panic. "Warning: unregistered materials being applied to critical systems. This violates all known safety protocols. Sometimes you've got to break protocol to fix the real problem," Tom said as he worked. "Your quantum fields are trying to compensate for physical damage. Fix the physical problem first, then worry about the quantum stuff." He finished applying the tape and closed the panel. The reactor's hum stabilized even more. Reactor efficiency now at 40% above previous levels, the AI announced, sounding almost stunned. Tom grinned at the amazed aliens. "And that's why you called a Deathworlder. We're used to fixing things the hard way." He picked up his toolbox again. "Now let's take a look at that temporal anomaly you're worried about. Something tells me that's going to need more than just duct tape." The aliens looked at each other, then at the reactor readings. For the first time since the crisis began, there was a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Maybe this primitive human and his strange tools really could save their station after all. "The quantum core is through there," Technical Director Max said, pointing his tentacle at a sealed doorway. "But the safety protocols won't let anyone in while the temporal anomaly is active. The radiation levels are too high." Tom looked at the door, Then at his watch, 8 hours left. We can't wait for permission from your computers. The station's eye appeared. Access denied. Radiation levels exceed safe parameters for all known species. What about unknown species? Tom asked with a smile. Have you got data on human radiation tolerance? The AI paused. Negative. Human biological data, not in primary database. Good. Tom walked up to the door and started examining its edges. Because we're surprisingly tough. Coming from a planet with natural background radiation helps. First speaker Ben's crystal form pulsed with worry. Even if you could survive the radiation, the door won't open without AI authorization. Tom knocked on different parts of the wall next to the door. Every space station I've ever heard of has maintenance tunnels, places where robots or workers need to get in when the main systems fail. He pressed his ear against the wall and knocked again. Ah, hollow spot. Right here. The aliens watched in shock as Tom pulled a small crowbar from his toolbox. You cannot breach the station's structure. Max's tentacles waved frantically. The safety systems. Will take too long to fix this their way. Tom finished. He wedged the crowbar into a barely visible seam. Sometimes you've got to make your own door. With a grunt and a sharp pull, a panel popped open, revealing a narrow maintenance shaft. The AI's voice turned urgent. Warning. Unauthorized access detected. Security protocols. Override safety protocols. First speaker Ben commanded suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. The human has shown results. Let him continue. Tom nodded his thanks and shined his flashlight into the shaft. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but I can make it. He started pulling tools from his box and stuffing them in his pockets. The radiation levels, Max started, are probably why you're all still alive, Tom said, checking his watch again. Earth creatures evolved dealing with radiation, weather, and natural disasters. Makes us pretty hardy. He grinned. Besides, I used to do maintenance work at a nuclear power plant. This isn't my first radioactive rodeo. The station rumbled slightly, and new warning lights flashed. Temporal anomaly expanding, the AI announced. 7 hours, 45 minutes until point of no return. Tom pulled himself into the maintenance shaft. It was a tight fit, but he could move. Anyone who wants to help can guide me through these tunnels. Otherwise, stand back and let me work. To everyone's surprise, first speaker Ben moved closer. I will guide you. My crystalline form is more resistant to radiation than most. Tom nodded and started crawling through the shaft. The metal was warm under his hands, and his flashlight beam showed a maze of pipes and conduits. Left at the next junction, Ben's voice came through clearly. But be careful. The temporal distortions are stronger there. Tom turned left, then stopped. Ahead of him, the air itself seemed to twist and bend. His watch started running backward, then forward, then stopped completely. Well, that's not something you see every day, he muttered. He pulled a coin from his pocket and tossed it into the distortion. The coin aged to dust, then reversed to shine like new, then vanished completely. Perhaps we should reconsider, Ben started to say. No time for that, Tom said, and crawled straight into the distortion. The aliens heard his grunt of effort, then silence. Human life signs unclear, the AI announced. Temporal interference preventing accurate readings. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Tom's voice came through, scratchy but alive. Made it through. The quantum core is right below me. And folks, we've got bigger problems than I thought. You might want to evacuate non-essential personnel. This is going to get interesting. The aliens looked at each other nervously. Their station's fate now rested in the hands of a human with primitive tools, crawling through dangerous maintenance shafts, about to attempt something that all their advanced technology said was impossible. Somehow, that thought was both terrifying and reassuring at the same time. Tom hung from a maintenance ladder, looking down at the quantum core through a small access panel. The core was beautiful in a terrifying way, a sphere of swirling energy that pulsed with colors that shouldn't exist. Around it, time itself seemed to bend and twist. "Your quantum core is fighting against regular physics," he called out to the others. "That's your problem right there." "Impossible." Max's voice came through the communicator. "Our calculations are perfect." Tom pulled out his grandfather's watch again. The hands were spinning wildly, but in a pattern he was starting to understand. "See, that's the issue. You're so focused on the quantum math that you forgot the basics. Everything, even quantum stuff, has to follow some basic rules." The station shuddered. Warning lights flashed red. "Temporal anomaly increasing," the AI announced. 5 hours until point of no return." Tom watched his watch for another minute, then nodded to himself. "It's like an engine that's out of time. Your quantum core is fighting against normal spacetime, like a piston trying to fire at the wrong moment." "That makes no sense," Max protested. "Our quantum equations—" "Forget the equations for a minute," Tom interrupted. "Think about it like this. You've got a super advanced engine, but it's still an engine. It's still got to work with the universe around it." He pulled himself closer to the core, ignoring the tingles running through his body from the radiation. The watch in his hand continued its wild spinning, but he noticed something important. It had a pattern. "Every 12 seconds, the time distortion peaks," he said. "That's when your core is fighting hardest against normal physics. We need to adjust its timing." First speaker Ben's voice crackled through. "But the quantum harmonics are overthinking it," Tom finished. He pulled a handful of tools from his pockets and laid them out on a nearby ledge. "Sometimes you need to step back and look at the simple picture." He studied the core's support structure. Massive power conduits fed into it, all controlled by the station's advanced computers. But underneath all that technology, there were still basic mechanical parts. "Your computers are trying to solve this with pure math," Tom explained as he worked. "But what you really need is to feel the rhythm of the machine." He began tapping the main power conduit with his wrench, listening carefully. "What are you doing?" Max asked, horror in his voice. "Finding the beat," Tom answered. "Every machine has one, even your quantum core." He continued tapping, moving around the core's support structure. "There, hear that resonance?" No one replied, but Tom wasn't waiting for an answer. He pulled out several wrenches and began attaching them to key points around the core's framework. "Human," the AI interrupted, "your actions do not match any known repair protocols." "That's because I'm not following protocols," Tom said, sweat dripping from his forehead despite the cool air. "I'm following instinct, something you can't program." He checked his watch again. The pattern was clearer now, like a heartbeat that was just slightly off rhythm. "Okay, here's what's going to happen," he announced. "I'm going to adjust these support struts. It'll change the core's resonance frequency. When I give the signal, you need to pulse your quantum fields exactly when I say." "But the calculations," Max started. "No time for calculations," Tom cut him off. "When I say now, you pulse those fields. Trust me." He positioned himself by the largest wrench. The quantum core pulsed faster, its colors shifting dangerously. Tom watched his watch, feeling the station's vibrations through his hands, waiting for exactly the right moment. "Get ready," he called out. The watch's hands aligned, and he felt the subtle shift in the core's rhythm. "Now." Tom threw his whole weight onto the wrench. Metal groaned. Energy crackled. For a moment, it seemed like time itself held its breath. Then everything changed. The quantum core flashed with blinding light. Energy surged through the station, making every screen and hologram flicker wildly. Tom held onto the wrench with all his strength as reality itself seemed to bend around him. "What's happening?" First speaker Ben's voice crackled through the communicator. "Core temperature rising beyond safe levels," Max shouted. "It's working," Tom called back, his voice strained. "The core's trying to sync up with normal spacetime. Just got to hold it steady." His watch had stopped spinning, and now ticked with perfect regularity. But the quantum core was fighting back, trying to return to its chaotic state. Warnings blared throughout the station. 30 minutes until point of no return, the AI announced, its voice distorting. Core containment failing. Tom looked at the complex network of power conduits around him. Each one glowed with dangerous levels of energy. One wrong move would be fatal. I need more leverage, he muttered. Then louder. Max, when I say the word, cut power to conduits 3 through 7. That's impossible, Max protested. The core wooled. Trust me. Those conduits are forcing it out of sync. We need to let it find its natural rhythm. There was a pause. Then first speaker Ben's voice. Do as he says. Max. Tom braced himself. On my mark. Now. The power conduits went dark. The quantum core pulsed violently, and Tom felt himself being pulled in different directions as time distorted around him. His muscles screamed as he held the wrench in position. 20 minutes remaining, the AI warned. Almost. There. Tom grunted. He could feel the core's rhythm changing, becoming more stable. But something was still wrong. His watch showed him the truth. The timing was still slightly off. That's when he saw it. A small mechanical regulator, barely visible behind the main power coupling. It was vibrating at the wrong frequency, fighting against his repairs. I need to reach that regulator, he said. But the radiation levels. He checked his watch again. 15 minutes left. No choice, he muttered, and began climbing down towards the regulator. The radiation made his skin tingle and his head spin, but he kept moving. Human life signs becoming critical, the AI announced. Recommend immediate evacuation. Tom ignored the warning. He stretched out his arm, fingers reaching for the regulator. The metal was hot enough to burn through his work gloves. 10 minutes until point of no return. With a final effort, Tom grabbed the regulator and turned it 1/4 turn to the right. The effect was immediate. The quantum core's light changed from angry red to a calm blue. The violent vibrations smoothed out. Core synchronization achieving stability, the AI reported, sounding surprised. Temporal anomaly decreasing. Tom smiled weakly. See, sometimes you just need to. His vision blurred. The radiation exposure was finally taking its toll. Get him out of there. First, Speaker Ben ordered. The emergency transport beam activated just as Tom's grip failed. He materialized in the control room, stumbling as his legs gave way. Medical robots rushed forward. 5 minutes until. Correction. Temporal anomaly contained. Core stability restored to nominal levels. The aliens stared at their readings in disbelief. The quantum core was running more smoothly than it ever had before. How? Max asked, his tentacles waving in confusion. All he did was adjust a simple mechanical regulator. Tom lay on the medical bed, giving a weak thumbs up as the robots treated his radiation exposure. Sometimes, the smallest things make the biggest difference. He coughed. Your quantum core just needed to be in sync with the universe around it. All that fancy tech was fighting against basic physics. First, Speaker Ben's crystal form glowed brightly. You saved our station. But the radiation exposure, Tom waved him off, had worse at the nuclear plant back home. Just need some rest. He checked his watch one last time. It was ticking perfectly. And maybe some coffee. The aliens looked at each other, then back at their monitors. Their most advanced technology had failed, but a human with basic tools and practical knowledge had succeeded. It was a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. The station's AI made one final announcement. Notice. Adding human intuition to primary problem-solving protocols. Tom just smiled and closed his eyes. It had been a long day. 3 days later, Tom stood in the Galactic Council chamber again. This time, instead of panic, the room was filled with curious whispers and respectful glances. His radiation burns had healed surprisingly quickly. another quirk of human biology that amazed the alien medical staff. The station's quantum core is running at 143% efficiency, Technical Director Max announced, his tentacles moving in excited patterns. Better than when it was first installed. We've been studying the modifications you made. Simple fixes, Tom shrugged, absently spinning a wrench in his hand. Several nearby aliens still flinched at the sight of the tool, but their fear had been replaced by fascination. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most complicated one. First speaker Ben's crystal form glowed brightly. The Council has come to a decision. We would like to offer Earth a permanent contract for engineering consultants. Tom raised an eyebrow. You want more humans up here? Your species has a unique way of solving problems, Ben explained. What you call basic mechanical knowledge is something our civilizations have lost in our pursuit of advanced technology. We've forgotten that sometimes you need to. What was your phrase? Give it a good whack. The chamber filled with laughter. Even the station's AI, which had been recalibrated to better understand human unpredictability, pulsed with what seemed like amusement. We've already received requests from 12 other stations, Max added. They all want human engineers on their maintenance teams. Your reputation has spread quickly. Tom nodded, looking around the chamber. Where once he had seen only advanced aliens with their fancy technology, he now saw potential colleagues who could learn from humanity's practical experience and maybe teach humans a thing or two in return. I'll talk to some people back home, he said. Got a few good mechanics in mind who might be interested, but one condition. He pulled out his battered toolbox. We bring our own tools. Agreed, Ben said quickly. Though our scientists would like to study this duct tape of yours. Its properties in quantum environments are quite remarkable. Tom laughed. Wait till you see WD-40. The chamber's main display lit up with incoming messages. More stations requesting human assistance. Some even specifically asked for primitive solutions to their advanced problems. There's one more thing, Ben said. His crystal form shifted to project an image, a new warning sign being installed throughout the station. It showed a human figure with a wrench, and beneath it the words, "In case of emergency, call the Deathworlder." The sign was the AI's idea. Max explained. It calculated that having such a reminder would improve emergency response times by 47%. Tom packed his tools away, smiling. Just remember, we're not miracle workers. We just understand that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Speaking of old ways, Ben said, your vehicle on Earth, your truck. We took the liberty of having our best quantum engineers examine it while you were recovering. Tom's smile dropped. You didn't try to improve it, did you? They spent 6 hours trying to understand why it wouldn't start, Max said, his tentacles twitching with embarrassment. In the end, they had to admit defeat. Probably just needs its timing belt adjusted, Tom said. 20-minute job with basic tools. The aliens looked at each other, then back at Tom. He could see the request in their eyes before they spoke it. Would you mind showing us? Ben asked. For educational purposes, of course. Tom checked his watch, his old analog one that had helped save the station. It was still keeping perfect time. Sure, he said. Lesson 1 in human engineering. Sometimes the best computer is right here. He tapped his head. As he followed them to where they had stored his truck, Tom couldn't help but smile. Humanity had just found its place in the galaxy, not because of advanced technology or powerful weapons, but because they remembered how to fix things the old-fashioned way. Behind him, the station's AI made one final update to its protocols. Note, when complex solutions fail, try the human approach. Sometimes simpler is better.